Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Lykke Li record, I Never Learn. Lykke Li is a Swedish singer-songwriter. I have been following her stuff since 2008 when she dropped her full-length debut record, Youth Novels. An LP that I hear was basically the start of a trilogy, which is ending with this latest third record of hers. And the connections between these three EPs must be incredibly personal because the sonic shifts that Li made from record to record are kind of what turned me off to her music in the first place. Back in 2008, Youth Novels just wooed me with these plinky, sweet, little quaint piano ballads that were so endearing. But on her sophomore record, it seems that Li just kind of took on this incredibly serious tone, and I have no idea why. Maybe to make her songs sound more mature. There were some tracks on this that did have a quaintness to them, just like the debut record, like Silence is a Blessing, but it just was not as lovely. Frequent collaborator, producer, writer Bjorn Lenting really helped Li bring a much more panoramic, grand, large, and in-charge sound to this new record. This thing was soft and pretty and cavernous like a beach house record, but in its best moments, much more dramatic. And Going Down This Road churned out some really great singles for Li that helped boost her career, like I Follow Rivers and Love Out of Lust. And Li is working with Bjorn again on this new record, as well as Greg Kurstin of The Bird and the Bee, as well as songwriter Rick Knowles, and this new LP of hers also brings a bit of a sonic shift to the table from her last album. What Li is showing off on this latest LP, this new side of her, is stripped back, sad, heartbroken, bare, overly emotional, really dramatic, passionate. This change of pace occurs most boldly on lead singles like Love Me Like I'm Not Made of Stone. One of her best tracks ever, in my opinion, her most heartfelt song. I love the acoustic guitars on this track. They're just so loosely strummed. They just seem so organic. And her voice, it's cracking, it's wailing, it's just pleading, it's begging, it's screaming. And there are lyrics on this track that hint toward the failure of a relationship on the part of the narrator. They might have just screwed things up. But the lyrics also deliver this touching portrayal of selfless, undying love. It's like we're in this terrible place right now, but we want to get in this great place. And even though the picture, in a sense, seems beautiful, you know, love me despite mistakes, love me despite flaws, Li delivers these lyrics in a voice that sounds like she's pleading with this person to love her, rather than, you know, sounding warm and inviting or something like that. It's like she's really kind of using her last bits of strength to grab at this person who she might see slipping away. And I'm assuming the request for this relationship restart did not go through, since the title of the next track on this thing is Never Gonna Love Again. A very sad song subject, which is matched with some incredibly saccharine instrumentation, which is incredibly smudged by the reverb that's just slathered onto this record. It's kind of like looking at a really freshly painted, very detailed portrait, and then just a bucket of water is dumped onto it, and then all these fine lines are just blurred. And I guess that's kind of the other side of this record. These pleasant, easy on the ears, very instrumentally lush pop tunes that are just so soaked, just overwhelming with reverb, to the point where they just seem large and grand and humongous, and yet blobby and kind of formless. And sometimes, even though this is pop music, the least gripping thing about these tracks is Li's voice, mostly because maybe the melodies not really stand out, or her voice itself is kind of buried in the reverb or buried behind the instrumentation. Tracks like this on this record range from the guitar-driven opening track, I Never Learn, where essentially Li's vocals, which are multi-tracked and just layered on top of one another, singing throughout this song, are so soft and just so laid back and just so blended in with one another. It's kind of like listening to background vocals sing throughout the entirety of the track. I was kind of sitting back waiting for a louder, bolder, more emotive vocal to kind of step in and steal the spotlight on the song, but it never happened. Ain't No Rest for the Wicked is probably the best of these instrumentally lush and very reverb-heavy tracks. Not because it's produced better or anything like that, but because melody-wise and song-wise, it is the best tune. It's one of the few moments where the really stripped-back verses that contrast the dense choruses actually brings a very wonderful and catchy and sticky vocal melody to the table. But even though this song was delivered early on before the release of this record, I think the track Gunshot was even more single-worthy. I think maybe the most true blue pop song on this entire LP. Despite the very moody opener on this track, it's maybe one of the sweetest songs on the entire record. And even though there are highlights on this LP like that, tracks like Silverline and Just Like a Dream are near unmemorable. I would say skippable tracks if it weren't for the fact that just the instrumentation is pretty and feels good while it's on. But these are not tracks I see sticking in people's heads toward the end of the year. While I didn't think this LP was terrible, I liked it overall. I still think it's an honest shame that more songs on this thing didn't really go down the road of the best track on this entire LP, Love Me Like I'm Not Made of Stone. The closest this record comes to that sentiment once again is the almost bare piano ballad, Sleeping Alone, that closes the record out. It has maybe one of the most heart-wrenching sentiments on the entire album, but it's nowhere near the emotional climax of Love Me Like I'm Not Made of Stone. And as it is the finish of the album, it's a kind of an inconspicuous finish. When the song is over and the album is over, I was like, huh, that's it. It's done. And that's another thing. This is the shortest record Li has put out yet. I mean, it's just over 30 minutes, where her two previous records were at least 40. Not saying that 40-minute records are necessarily better than 30-minute records, but if you're going to hit me with 30 minutes, it's got to be all killer, no filler. Unfortunately, that's not what I got. There are several great tracks on this album, in my opinion, and with the album track list being so short, that's about half the album. But these great songs are padded out with tracks that are just phenomenally okay. The loads of effects on this LP just keep the instrumentation and Li's voice as well from having any bite or any real emotional impact. You know, the most stripped back, raw, and just straightforward song, Love Me Like I'm Not Made of Stone, is the best on here for a reason, because it's so emotional, because it's so upfront with everything. There's nothing to hide. Whereas on every other track here, it seems like all that Li and Bjorn are trying to do is obscure things and hide things and push things behind reverb and just shove things into a corner. For what reason, I'm not sure. I know that not every track on here is an amazing song, but I think so many songs on this record could have come out better if they were just given the dramatic reading that Love Me Like I'm Not Made of Stone was. Instead, we're just getting this series of songs that are simply just going through the motions of contemporary indie pop, and that's it. I'm feeling a decent to strong 6 on this thing. Transition, if you've given this LP a listen, what did you think of it? Did you love it, hate it, why? What do you think I should review next? And that's it. Anthony Fantano, Lykke Li, Wounded Rhymes. I never learn. Forever.